Please join me in a very warm welcome to our next speaker, Sheela Gowda. Very warm welcome. Sheela, we've done long interviews last time, so today maybe a few new questions. I wanted to ask you how it all started. How did you come to art? How did art come to you? To begin with the beginning, as Bastian Adler always used to say.
In terms of, I would say in terms of art education, it began soon after, 2 weeks after my school education, when I walked into a neighborhood art school, and I knew it from the moment I walked in that this was going to be what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
And where would you say, I spoke the other day to Gerhard Richter, and he said there is student work, and then at a certain moment the catalogue raisonné starts, the first work he considered to be valid, no longer student work. Where would you say for you does the catalogue raisonné start? Where is your first piece which you consider to be part of that catalogue raisonné?
Yes, catalogue raisonné. It depends from which perspective you are looking. If you're looking at presenting your resume on the international art scene, then something very local, something very meaningfully local might not have any kind of understanding to a bigger audience. But I would say what we did in Bangalore as students, some of our first efforts to take art to the people, however problematic it was in terms of the form we used or the kind of work we were doing, I think that those are very important starting points.
And maybe the moment when you left painting, we last time spoke about 1990, and it was the very beginning of the 90s when you all of a sudden started to use non-art materials. I think Gowda was a very early non-art material, and that somehow was a new beginning. Can you tell me about what happened at that moment in the work?
Well, I have been thinking about it myself as to, looking back in a way, having the advantage of time and where I have been since, I think it might be that it was becoming getting politicized as an artist. That by that I mean that it's not that what you were doing was without any sense of critique of what was happening to you around you, or looking at things around you, but about consciously bringing forth. I think this is a consciousness that became quite different at that moment. In that sense, it's a politicization. I guess from then on, my work, it's not just about the use of the material, but the nature and the questioning of what I wanted to say was important.
And were there any influences, inspirations, heroes, heroines, artists who sort of inspired you at that moment?
No particular person, but there have been many inspiring figures through my art education.
Can you tell me about them?
Right from the first art teacher, R.M. Hadford, who started this little private school in Bangalore at the back of a vegetable market, and it was this little school into which I walked into that took me to where I am today as an artist, because he was the one who made us think about, made us want to be an artist, and to question things around us. And I think that is a very valid position even today.
And Peter de Francia seems to be out, because he seems to be somebody who pops up again and again, and we have not really spoken about him yet today. What was his?
Just last week I attended his private view where he's 90, sitting in a wheelchair in the middle of his gallery show, and as fiery as ever, and of course very critical as well. And I guess that's something he represented for all of us who studied under him. Extremely, we had to brace up against him to show our work because of the kind of teacher that he was. He would mince no words to tell us or ask us certain questions. We had to find the answers that we were happy with to begin with.
When we spoke last time in your studio, you said something very special happened in 1995 when you did the Johannesburg biennial, and it's interesting because we just heard from Gita about this biennial. Can you tell us about this?
It was I think it was one of the first shows that I did on the international level, and quite exciting. And I guess it was just about, I don't know, I mean, it was not just it was not that way very significant, but I think it was the beginning for many other things that followed it. Yes. And I think about, for example, what Gita said about the way the Biennale was going to question the problem of looking at the past, what has happened, the way one dealt with it, and the way they were also trying to take away the borders between the way, for example, a museum grouping is made. They try to cut away, they rethink the whole system of how to look at one's past and the categories that normally are made.
One of the things which struck me, and I had not seen this so much in exhibitions because Europe, your work has been a lot of installations and sculpture, but in the studio we saw many drawings. There seems to be a daily practice almost of drawing and watercolors. And can you talk about this? Is that a continuum in the work? Or?
Drawing is a thinking means for me. I visualize quite a lot in my mind, and then I kind of lay it out in somewhere between actually realizing the work and between the visualization in my mind. So that there is not just the drawing. I write as well into my book, ask questions, and so when I look back upon them, they can never somewhere they are like little fragments of my mind, really, towards a work, normally not independent of it.
And another parallel reality are the newspaper work, which we also saw, and that you answered that when I asked you about your political work. Is that something which goes on, which continues? Is it something which you stopped doing?
By newspaper work, you mean the particular work that I made, where I recreated a newspaper? Yeah, it was a work done in 2008 called Best Cutting, where in a way we put together my husband Christoph, who is also an incorrigible holder of things, collecting fragments, cutouts from newspapers, and my own, and we recreated a newspaper which was called Chronicles, which in a way came about through comment on and finally the work was about the relationship of content and of going into the world of what we read and of surface, of materiality.
Do you have projects which have not happened, projects which are unrealized, projects which were censored or too big to be realized, or forgotten projects in low cost?
I don't
or
think
utopias?
So. I don't think so, but there are projects which are outside the art field, idea of art field. So those are things that need to be realized. Yes.
And can you talk about those?
I think firstly that to step out in a way from the diagram that of the grid that is made by the dots that we call an art system, and that we seem to be walking between these, making the same diagram, maybe with a little variation here and there. So I would like to step out of that and see where that can lead to, not necessarily towards making a conventional art object, but maybe that experience would be a catalyst for something else.
Now, we just saw each other in London 2 or 3 days ago, and it might be interesting for the audience here who hasn't seen this show yet to hear about your extraordinary new show you opened at Iniva, which is basically a new work of our people, 2011. Could you tell us about this installation? It's a complete installation, one can say. It's many different elements which form a room.
Yeah, well, it's very hard to talk about an installation in because it's already quite abstract, but to speak about it fragments it even more. But it is a work which takes itself from the protagonist of a little figure, a wooden chip, as so to say, and brings it into the gets framed by other elements of architectural elements like doors and door frames and windows. So there's nothing much I can say in
But is there a connection to architecture? Because there are lots of different, almost architectural devices. There are sort of quasi-windows, there are sculptural elements in the space. It's a quasi-architecture.
It is, but it is also there are also metaphors towards other things, other aspects of how one can read it in terms of history, for example. But physically, yes, they are pieces of architecture.
Because this whole connection to architecture, I was also wondering when we worked on Indian Highway, and you installed this almost architectural structure, yes, made out of oil drums, which became a building within the building. It was almost like a Russian matryoshka. You had it in the serpentine, a building within the building. Can you tell us about this and the connection there to architecture? It's kind of almost an emergency kind of architecture, or a self-organized architecture, I suppose.
Yeah, I think in architecture, in inverted commas, it's an architecture of the workers. That was the starting point. The incidental nature of the tar drum houses, and as an artist to take it to intervene into, take it to another, to transform it into an object where the interaction of the material, the space that it creates, the proportions that create that space, and forcing the viewer to enter that on one's knees, so to say, to get down to the level of the ground, and then to look up and encounter a vast infinite space of a starry sky. That was my objective.
What would be your advice? Rainer Maria Rilke wrote this little book, and I was wondering your advice to a young artist now, a young art student. What would you?
You make me feel very old. But I consider, yes, I wouldn't give any advice.
And are you teaching?
I think hard work is important, not something that happens like that.
And are you teaching?
No, not anymore. I don't think I want to. Not on a long-term basis. No.
And would you teach if there would be a kind of a new Black Mountain College? Because I mean, most of the artists of my generation in Europe at the moment are not teaching, because they say they don't really want to cope with the ever-increasing, bureaucracy of art schools, and so they refuse to teach. And we're discussing a lot if there would be such a thing as a new Black Mountain College, a truly experimental transdisciplinary school that they, most of my artist friends in Europe would want to teach. It's a missing institution. Is that the case for you? If there was a Black Mountain College type of school, would you teach, or what's the kind of art school you'd imagine?
Yes, I think one of the things that put me off from teaching was the terrible state of the administrative aspects of the college, and the fact that they don't realize that you're apart from being a teacher there, you are an artist, and that unless you are practicing artist, you can never be really a good teacher. And that conventional art colleges and schools do not allow for that kind of freedom in terms of time or the space that one needs. If there was I think however free art college is, I would still say that I would like to teach off and on, not on a permanent basis, not on a day-to-day level. I'm still interested, even if it's a bad art college in inverted commas, I would still teach there, but only on a short-term basis, as an invited.
And I am curious about this idea of artist-invented institutions, because the crisis in, for example, the United States and in Europe of art schools has now provoked an incredible new invention of artists invented their own art schools. Piero Golia's Mountain College in LA, we have the Bruce High Quality Foundation School in New York, we have SOMA in Mexico City, and so on and so on. And obviously a similar thing is also true for artists inventing their own museums, inventing their own art centers. I was wondering, given the recurrent remarks of artists here that there is a lack of public institutions, what would be the kind of institution you'd imagine? What's your kind of ideal museum or art center of the 21st century?
Well, I think I would differentiate between an institution of an art center from a museum. I think museums, in a way, are necessary structures that are necessary, but an art center is something I would like a Kunsthalle, for example. I would see it as something that is constantly changing, bringing in, giving the ability, bringing in opportunities for people to see something that's very, very contemporary, which is something that's very lacking, which is why it's such a refreshing thing to see Arshia Lokhandwala's show at Lalit Kala Akademi Rabindra Bhavan, which I saw this afternoon, because it's not so much that it is the fact that hardly any of the very contemporary work is being shown in public spaces. The only ones that we get to see are some of the few galleries that show these kind of works.
Great, thank you so much. Many, many thanks to Sheela Gowda. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. See you soon.